Good morning, Team Alabama. We are ready for more of Anne Frank. We are on page 501. Please find that. Mr. Frank, it might be better for us to go into Peter's room. They were talking about him tutoring Peter, and he's saying it may be easier to tutor him in his room. Now watch what Mrs. Van Daan does and see if you'd be okay with this if you were Mrs. Frank. Mrs. Van Daan, that's right. You go in there, Peter, and you listen to Mr. Frank. Mr. Frank is a highly educated man. And as Mr. Frank is about to follow Peter into his room, Mrs. Frank stops him and wipes the lipstick from his lips. And then she closes the door after them because Mrs. Van Daan kissed him. Anne on the floor listening. Shh, I can hear a man's voice talking. Mr. Van Daan to Anne. Isn't it bad enough here without you sprawling all over the place? Anne, sit up. Anne sits up. Mrs. Van Daan to Mr. Van Daan. If you didn't smoke so much, you wouldn't be so bad-tempered. Am I smoking? Do you see me smoking? Don't tell me you've used up all those cigarettes. One package. Meep only brought me one package. It's a filthy habit anyway. It's a good time to break yourself. Oh, stop it, please. You're smoking up all our money, and you know that, don't you? Will you shut up? During this, Mrs. Frank and Margot have studiously kept their eyes down, but Anne, seated on the floor, has been following the discussion interestedly. Mr. Van Daan turns to see her staring up at him. And what are you staring at? Anne, I have never heard grown-ups quarrel before. I thought only children quarreled. Mr. Van Daan, this isn't a quarrel, it's a discussion, and I've never heard children so rude before. Anne, rising indignantly. I? Rude? Yes. Mrs. Frank, quickly. Anne, will you get me my knitting? Anne goes to get it. I must remember when Meep comes to ask her to bring me some more wool. Margot, going to her room. I need some hairpins and some soap. I made a list. She goes into her bedroom to get the list. Mrs. Frank to Anne. Have you some library books for Meep when she comes? Anne, it's a wonder that Meep has a life of her own the way that we make her run errands for us. Please, Meep, get me some starch. Please take my hair out and have it cut. Tell me all of the latest news, Meep. Excuse me. Page 502. She goes over, kneeling on the couch beside Mr. Van Daan. Did you know she was engaged? His name is Dirk, and Meep's afraid that the Nazis will ship him off to Germany to work in one of their war plants. That's what they're doing with some of the young Dutchmen. They pick them up off the streets. Mr. Van Daan interrupting. Don't you ever get tired of talking? Suppose you try keeping still for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. He starts to pace again, and Anne follows him, mimicking him. Mimicking means she goes behind him and she copies what he does. So mimic. Mimic means to mock or copy. Mrs. Frank jumps up and takes her by the arm up to the sink and gives her a glass of milk. Come here, Anne. It's time for your glass of milk. Talk, talk, talk. I never heard such a child. Where is my everything every evening? It's the same talk, talk, talk. He looks around. Where is my... What are you looking for? My pipe. Have you seen my pipe? What good's a pipe? You haven't got any tobacco. At least I'll have something to hold in my mouth. Opening Margot's bedroom door. Margot, have you seen my pipe? It was on the table last night. Anne puts her glass of milk on the table and picks up his pipe, hiding it behind her back. I know, Anne. Did you see my pipe? Anne. Mr. Van Daan is speaking to you. Am I allowed to talk now? You're the most aggravating. The trouble with you, you've been spoiled. What you need is a good old-fashioned spanking. Anne, mimicking Mrs. Van Daan. Remember, Mr. So-and-so, remember, I'm a lady. She thrusts the pipe into his mouth and then picks up her glass of milk. Mr. Van Daan, restraining himself with difficulty. Why aren't you quiet and nice and quiet like your sister Margot? Why do you have to show off all the time? Let me give you a little advice, young lady. Men don't like that kind of thing in a girl. You know that? A man likes a girl who will listen to him once in a while, a domestic girl who will keep her house shining for her husband, who loves to cook and sew, and I'd cut my throat first. I'd open my veins. I'm going to be remarkable. I'm going to Paris. Paris, Mr. Van Daan says. Anne, to study music and art. Okay, so that's another good fact we can add, that Anne desires to go to Paris to study music and art. And she doesn't like the idea of just being married and taking care of her husband. I'm going to be a famous dancer or singer or something wonderful. She makes a wide gesture, spilling the glass of milk on the fur coat in Mrs. Van Dan's lap. Margot rushes quickly over with a towel, and Anne tries to brush the milk off with her skirts. Mrs. Van Daan, now look what you've done, you clumsy little fool. My beautiful fur coat my father gave me. I'm so sorry. What do you care? It isn't yours, so go on and ruin it. Do you know what that coat cost, do you? And now look at it. Look at it. I'm very, very sorry. I could kill you for this. I could just kill you. Mrs. Van Daan goes up the stairs clutching her coat, and Mr. Van Daan starts after her. Petronella, Leafy, Leafy. That's darling, darling, Mr. Van Dan's calling her. Come back, the supper, come back. And you must not behave in that way. It was an accident. Anyone can have an accident. I don't mean that. I mean the answering back. You must not answer back. They are our guests. We must always show the greatest courtesy to them. We are all living under terrible tension. She stops at Margot and indicates that the Van Dans can hear, and when he is gone, she continues, that's why we must control ourselves. You don't hear Margot getting into arguments with them, do you? Watch Margot. She's always courteous with them, never familiar. She keeps her distance, and they respect her for that. Try to be like Margot. Okay, we're going to stop there for today. So why don't you write down what Anne did? She spilt her milk on Mrs. Van Dan's fur coat, okay? And she kind of mocks or mimics Mr. Van Dan. And everybody's starting to get on people's nerves, on each other's nerves. They've been there now a couple months, and people are starting to kind of aggravate each other. So add that. Have a great rest of your day, Team Alabama.